everyone, and welcome to this episode, the Culture One of the Women Talking About Learning podcast. I'm Andrew Jacobs. As you may know, topics for the podcast come from everywhere. Sometimes it's previous guests and people who I chat with who make suggestions. We look at the topics and then add them to the recording schedule. What always excites and delights us is when guests take a topic and interpret it in their own unique way. This episode is just one of those. It focuses on learning culture and is a fascinating listen. Our first guest is Romy Alexandra. Romy specialises in designing and facilitating transformative experiences that integrate psychological safety, experiential learning, neuroscience and sustained behaviour change. A former Peace Corps volunteer and Fulbright scholar, Romy brings a global perspective and nearly 15 years of international expertise spanning 85 countries across 4 continents. She has worked with organisations across every sector, from governments to Fortune 500 companies to Formula One teams, also helping individuals and organisations unlock their potential and build their collaborative competencies necessary for high performance. Our second guest is Anu Roy, one of the 30 under 30 learning technologists in the UK in 2024. Anu is a senior instructional designer specialising in AI learner-centred technology and design. Her design values are rooted in an inclusive, trauma-informed and aligned with business KPIs. In her spare time, she is an avid F1 watcher, badminton player and working on gender equity CSR projects with the UN. Recorded in July 2025, this is Women Talking About Learning. This is Romy and Anu talking about culture.
Romy, first of all, you can hear me. That's a bonus.
Yes.
Good. How are you doing today and where are you joining us from?
I'm doing really well, thanks, Anu. I'm calling in right now from a little corner of Spain for the summer holidays. How about you? Where in the world are you and how are you doing today?
I am a little bit tired today from adult life, but otherwise, I'm good. And I'm joining you from the occasionally Scottish city of Glasgow.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you and appreciate the honesty. The tired from adulting is something I experience quite regularly. Right now, I'm definitely in a bubble, not thinking of those things because I'm a little bit on summer holidays. But thank you for kicking us off in that way because we don't talk enough about that.
Yeah, we should definitely talk more about it. So I'm neurodivergent. I was basically told I have ADHD when I kept like failing my big school tests. Cause I would do all the like I'm a note taker. If I you wanna see the notes I took for this one interview, like in a podcast session, I was like, oh yeah, I'm coming in with the notes, 5 notes, 6 pens. That's very ADHD of me. But when I used to teach, sometimes kids came in and I could tell from body language or face that they were like, why are we learning today? Which is such a valid question. Nobody asked that to me at school. So I would kind of scan for a color because uniforms and everyone came in and I'd be like, anyone got a color in mind for mood? And nobody would say anything. And then cold calling would try and make eye contact with somebody that I can. And they'd be like, yeah, I'll give you a color today. It's yellow. They're trying to find like gender neutral colors as well. So they'd be like, I'll give you a color today. Pink. But if a boy said pink, they'd be like, oh, why did I say that? Why did I say that? So colors are now a big way for me to just be like, hey, I'll break some ice. I'm a little bit tired, but this conversation is so important that I wouldn't miss it for anything.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much. I mean, cheers to the Neurospicy Club. I'm also neurodivergent with ADHD and love that. Yes, and I love that you found ways to use your own experience to then create more inclusive opportunities for your own students. I love using colors or weather, different metaphors. So thank you for sharing that. This is actually recently I've been really reflecting on how I even got into this learning and culture space. And I had kind of blocked out for quite too long of my life until recently. I really did some deep reflection and realized, oh, the part of the reason I think why I'm so passionate about learning, in particular about creating psychologically safe and inclusive learning cultures, is because that is exactly a way I did not feel growing up. It was definitely labeled not neurodivergent. It was you have a learning disability. And I went into a special group or in school, right? I was definitely segmented out to a special room where I felt so, let's say, not seen for the gifts that I did have. I felt I was, treated lesser than, and probably, what I realized over time is that I never thought I would ever enter the learning space, but it's precisely because I think of those experiences and over time realizing how important learning is. It's not just something you do in a classroom or in a boardroom or in a office. It's how we evolve as human beings. In our day-to-day life, we need learning to keep growing. And so how can we do that in more interactive, experiential, effective ways? That's actually what brought me to this work. So you made that connection. I'm really curious to know from you what brought you into the learning and culture space.
I wanted to feel a sense of belonging.
Mm,
Um, when my family moved to Scotland and I was very young, it was microaggression after microaggression. Just I was misnamed. My name is Anu. I was called Anna, Annie. I have a really specific memory today in my head because I was just putting a bit of concealer on. When I was high schoolish, and my high school Bible is Gossip Girl. So you got to know I get all my stereotypes of the corporate world from Gossip Girl. So I will be using metaphors from Gossip Girl. So I'm in the classroom, I'm like back of the classroom, and yeah, wasn't doing really well at school. I think I always prided myself on my productivity as a neurospicy kid. And my math grades were terrible. Yeah, where I couldn't focus because like I like art, I like sketching, but I couldn't focus in math. And a very popular girl walked in and she wanted to use like ID because she wanted to start going to clubs. She was Scottish and she kind of turned to me. She was like, well, I could take Anu's ID because Anu is a little bit tan. She basically started like, you
mm,
know, saying, how Indian am I? Am I brown enough? Am I not brown? Because that happened to me when I was so young. I think I've become very protective about how learners feel, how learners look. How do they look when they walk into a classroom? Who's getting bullied? Who feels excluded? Who's sitting at the back of the classroom? Who's joined me right at the front? Because that was me when I was a kid, right at the front, because that's proximity. If I'm looking at the teacher, if I'm looking at the board or the screen where they're teaching from, I have that proximity. So when I started teaching, I was looking at every face in the classroom. And yes, I thought about curriculum and lesson planning, but I thought about learners way more. And then, yeah, that's kind of how I got into it.
so beautiful. And I really, so much of what you just shared resonates. And I think across any sector, at this point, I've worked with, I think, every sector possible from formal education, non formal, corporate, UN, who knows, Formula One teams, you name it. At the end, what you said is so true. People, we need to put our participants and our learners in the center. And we need to bring more attention to feelings because um, I always I always come back to Antonio Damasio's quote. He's a neuroscientist, and he said, "We are not thinking machines that feel. We are first and foremost feeling machines that think." I don't know how I feel about calling people machines. I would say beings, but I love the sentiment here of we are emotional creatures, and our feelings will directly impact how much we take in the learning environment. Why this is what actually brought me to psychological safety. So many of the beautiful examples, thank you for sharing, that you mentioned. This is why psychological safety is the foundation for learning. We can't get to learning about content until everyone feels included, everyone feels that there's a space for them, they feel they can contribute, they can ask questions and not know the answers or admit their mistakes, right? All of that is essential. and I don't we don't see enough of it, I think, across areas. So thank you for championing good learning cultures within the classrooms that you're operating in. I'm curious to know a little bit more from you. Like, what do you think we're not talking enough about in the learning and culture space? And what do you think there needs to be even more emphasis on?
There needs to be more emphasis on any career words that can be related to both spectrums of gender. What is progression for, like, I'm going to take an example of educators. What is career progression for trans educators? What is career progression for LGBTQ plus educators? What is progression for neurospicy educators who CBA with corporate politics? Like, they CBA thinking I need to be nice to that manager, then that manager will write a review of my performance and give it to. That's a lot of ladders jumping in a neurospicy world.
Mm.
And I hope the ladder jumping comes to a close and we talk more about, we name feelings. What does belonging feel like? What does attainment feel like? There are so many words in learning. And when I started learning how to teach, I learned about andragogy, curriculum, and my brain splits it up like that. And as I said, I was really struggling to challenge myself as a practitioner, mostly because I thought, okay, I'm doing my day job, but I want to connect with the world. I was like, my ambition has no ceiling. Where are the other learners? Are they in classrooms? Are they sitting in skyscraper offices in London? Are they in a tiny village in India waiting for someone to tell them what a pad looks like, what tampons look like? I was like, where is the learner? Somebody told me about adaptive learning, and I said, yes, I know learners can adapt. I was mansplained to a lot when I was teacher training. I know learners can adapt. But as a human, there's only so much adapting refugees do. There's only so much adapting everyday people do. And it is about the person. If you don't pay attention to the person, you're putting a ceiling on how much they can learn. And I feel like you and I know how important that is. And the first learning resource that I saw, and it changed my world, was when I was designing curriculum for kids in foster care here in Scotland. And when they're in foster care, I was introduced to kids as Anu curriculum, Anu manager. And I think the word manager is always a bit. So I was like, hey, I'm Anu. Nice to meet you. I'm designing curriculum. And one of them was like, for what? And I was like, for safety, to keep. And I said that. And they kind of wouldn't, you know, respond until I was looking through resources. And there's a tech startup called CHAYN, Chen. And it's about, I think, life post sexual assault, that sort of stuff. It was started by, yeah, a woman. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I don't know who she's from or where she is. We look it up on LinkedIn, but it's pink. The whole website is pink, and everything is, all the headings are so chill. They're so minimalist, and the illustrations are so chill. And you can click on things. You can go into rooms, come out of rooms. That's the first piece of inclusive design work that wowed me about belonging. And I was like,
Taken aback. Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, it really resonates. It's so beautiful. And I one of the sentences that really has stuck with me and I keep kind of almost as a mantra repeating is love your content or love your curriculum, but love your participants more. And at the end of the day, as you said, we need to remember that who is the audience? In a corporate space, a lot of what I'm doing is so much about bespoke design because I get requests all the time from companies saying, "Here's the topic we want. what's your off the shelf offering and what's the price and what does it cover? And I said, well, just wait 1 second. Hold on. I actually want to have a meeting with you to better understand who are the people that we're designing for and what's actually going on, and what's happening. And really making sure that anything I design now for, outside of the education system, I understand there's different constraints there, but still, you need to make sure that you're putting the people front and center and you're designing for them. And even in the education sector, I think too often what happens is we are expecting uniform, right? We're teaching, let's say, teaching to a group of 20 students or 30 students. Same thing, corporate, 30 leaders, fine. Every single person in there has different background, experience, perspective to share, but we need to make sure that we are designing with them in mind and also giving them space to share their experiences. For me, this is also what experiential learning is about. It's about honoring the wisdom in the room. Training for me, experiential training is not the Romy show. It's not for just for me to come and share my knowledge and content dump. It's about how do I ask better questions? How do I, empower the group to really share their wisdom? And another thing that comes up for me when I think about what we're not talking enough about with learning and culture is I think this notion again of how do you embed a learning culture that is there outside of the official learning times, right? Because when most people think about learning, they're thinking about either we're in a classroom, in movie theater style seats, or okay, maybe we're in an office, we're kind of in a horseshoe, but we're in a room and we're learning. Don't get me wrong. This is what I love to do. I love designing experiential trainings and facilitating in the room. But what I think we're not talking enough about is the mindset that is needed to be embedded in the culture. And how do we empower anyone who's part of it, whether it's school system, teachers, leaders, managers? How do we empower everyone to really see that for me, learning is high performance. You can't reach your highest performance if you're not taking a learning mindset. What are the attitudes? How do you embrace change? How do you embrace unpredictability? How do you see micro moments and rituals that happen that are not just what happened in the classroom, but are how we're constant practices that we're working on together? Because only with that mindset can we really achieve our goals, but we don't talk enough about it.
We don't. That's so true. As a learner, I can tell you what I find a little bit scary in the corporate world is if I am because I love having a laptop, slides ready, decks ready, learning aid ready. But it's like, I think the skills of collaboration that sometimes in terms of culture in learning spaces, that takes me back a little. So if I have to pitch my idea to a senior stakeholder, I mean, from the get-go in my bedroom, I'm like, no, my idea sucks. I'm not presenting that. In the learning world, somebody else I have seen will have presented that idea. Sometimes it feels like Need for Speed a lot, and it feels like everybody's at the top of the Empire State Building looking for the best view. And it can feel like a lot, no matter who I am. And if I am the adaptive learner, I think the beauty of design is how it builds that community. Do you have any examples of community building through design?
Yeah, definitely. And I love what you're saying because we need collaboration, right? I think for me it's a combination. For me, examples that I've seen work really well is first on the individual level is helping everyone understand their learning preferences. So a lot of what we do is not learning styles, not visual, auditory, reading, writing, because there's no evidence behind that, but a lot of what I do in the experiential learning space is what I map out with teams is this is the cycle of how our brains learn. But everyone, when we need all of it, as you mentioned, we all want adaptability or flexibility. We need to harness the whole cycle in order to do our best or learn our best. but every single individual will have preferences along the way. Some of us might say, "Oh, I love when we get to just like get really practical hands on and try things out and really put things into practice and work." Some people might be like, "I love the brainstorming phase of ideating," or somebody might say, like, "I like to have the theory and really learn the content." Right? Everyone's going to have a different preference. So it's about one, how do I work one on one or even create a team profile that people see where their preferences are? Because I always say how we learn is actually how we live. If you are in that ideating brainstorming, or we call it imagining style, in experiential learning, you might constantly be like, "Oh, I have so many ideas," and constantly bringing so many ideas. But when it comes to, wait, we need to make a decision, oh, that's really hard, right? Or opposite, those who are really decisive in the deciding style might say, like, "We've spent enough time imagining brainstorming." So there are tensions there, but those tensions exist for a reason. And giving people common language or shared terms to, one, understand their own styles and preferences and see where there is room for adaptability and flexibility. Two, as you mentioned, in a team environment or collaboration environment, seeing like, let's have a snapshot. Where is our team? Where are the maybe hidden spots that we need to tap in more or leverage more as a team? And then, as you mentioned, I think it's also just about how to encourage teams in a very practical way to start practicing more psychological safety to infuse in the culture. How do you empower teams to really be able to speak up, have open conversation, iterative feedback culture, right? It's not about waiting for your once a year yearly performance and you're terrified you don't know what's going to happen. No, it's about how do you embed a culture of rapid feedback continuously so that people keep improving. But I will just say one last thing, since you mentioned collaborative learning. I think this is not talked about enough. I often think about these like e-learning programs, self-paced, right? We all sign up, we all want to learn, but in the end, what happens? We mostly drop out because there's no community there. We need a community, we need collaboration to do our best learning. So I'm also always encouraging like accountability partners or groups. So people regularly getting together outside of my learning sessions to see how are they tracking their progress, how are they holding themselves accountable, how are they continuing to reflect and share what they're learning. But I want to ask you a question. There's a real challenge here between creative and critical thinking. And so, what advice do you think we need to adopt to make this work better?
Yeah, I need a thinking moment.
The critical question.
Critical thinking, creative thinking.
How do you find the blends?
There are no blocks to thinking. Like, both can blend. But oh, then we have to talk about systems. We have to talk about assessment, how our assessment's designed. I was really curious about that because I was always assigned the learning disability groups when I started teaching, only to find out that they had the poorest behavior records
Mm,
in school. And it was common all the time. I've done some teaching in the UK, done some teaching globally, and I kept just being like, why? Why are the neurospicy groups just constantly scolded for just saying, "Hi, I have a question." Oh, you're interrupting somebody. I need to ask. So that's where I think the languages of collaboration need to be universal. If you raise your hand to ask a question, you're not talking back. You're saying, "Hey, I want to connect.
mm.
Can I deepen that connection?"
Beautiful. Yeah, and I think I agree with you. I think we often think of these things as opposite, this creative and critical, but the fact is we need all of it. No one does their best work if they're not getting creative. There's an incredible book I highly recommend called Your Brain on Art. I don't know if you've read it, but it's amazing with tons of research behind why we need the arts and why we need to get more creative in our thinking. And I also think that through by right, this is kind of the learning cycle, right? We have the creative spaces and the critical thinking way spaces, and we need room for all of it, and we need to create spaces where students can explore, because learning is inherently super vulnerable when you have those preferences. When some people say, "I'm super into the creative part," some people might love it, whereas others might have most one something I read something like from Brene Brown, I think 1/3 of people hold a creativity scar, which is some moment, usually in school from their childhood, where somebody said you're not good enough or this, either in music or art or this, and they sort of said I'm not good, therefore I'm not creative, and they never went there. We need to hold space where everyone feels comfortable to step out of their comfort zone, flex those creative and critical thinking muscles, and also, also find space for them to shine where their strengths are too. What comes up for you?
Brene Brown said something about if other people are not in the arena, then it doesn't matter. Because Brene Brown's vulnerability TED Talk was huge for me as a teacher. Huge. Because to teach is to present. You're presenting. And if you're neurospicy, you can mask, but you're presenting. Just, yeah, shout out Brene. Love her work. I love what she's researched because her work was the first time I realized like performance output is also creative. The skills can be critical thinking, creative thinking, but any solution, learning solution, business learning solution, corporate action learning solution. So those are output of projects. They have to start from somewhere. Who's protecting the ideation of L&D? I would love to know what you think about that.
Ooh, who's protecting the innovation of L&D? It's such a great question because I think what I see happening a lot right now in the L&D space is lots of disconnections. You're gonna find the client or the whoever is in charge, the manager who's kind of directly related and listening to what do people need. Then you have the experienced designers over here who are getting like really creative with lots of ideas. Then you have and I usually see a lot of innovation there, but there's a disconnect, right? It doesn't feel innovative if we are not, as you said, creating an integrated process where everyone can come together for the greater good of the learners. Because again, we see too often it becomes a checkbox. We need to train our teachers in this. We need to train our leaders in this. Just come. And if we don't start to open up pathways of communication, taking a more holistic approach, really integrating the experiences, the innovation, the instructional design, the client experience, all of these things that come together for a holistic learning journey, for me, then your innovation is always going to be stuck because they're going to see some parts work, but some parts don't. But it's a great question. So maybe you can share what's your answer to that.
I asked it. Can't think of answer, but I'm trying to be like, why did I think about it? You mentioned F1,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know who you've designed for, but I believe in the country of Daniel Ricciardo. Like, Daniel Ricciardo is a gem of a human and a phenomenal driver. Phenomenal driver. And at some point, Daniel's lap times were lagging. And as a Ricciardo fan who watches F1, I mean, that's okay. Just taking a bit longer. And then certain announcements get made. Obviously, fans have the right to feelings. Fans can be disappointed, but things need to match up. Who is said driver? Where is said car? Because I was at Silverstone, but that was a post-Daniel era, and I was just like, he's not here. But that's because he's done so many laps in so many parts of the world. Innovation is where engine meets driver meets team principal meets a vision. It's a vision for where the car will go. Yeah.
And I would add, it's also
The protection of innovation.
yeah, sorry. I'd say yes and to everything. It's also the culture, right? How these all work together, because I will not talk about Formula One for just now, but you're absolutely right. I think a lot about how we're in environments where we have high performers, but the culture is not building them up. In fact, you might have really high performers or high potentials, but the cultural atmosphere is so either risk averse. We talked about innovation. You need psychological safety to have innovation, but you also need to be able to take calculated risks, become a disruptor. And if we're constantly saying this is how we've always done it, or we don't want to try something new, or we've already, et cetera, then we are not able to reach innovation. We need a culture that's going to embrace calculated risk taking, which also may come with people saying, I've made big mistakes, and failures. And how do we embrace that and embrace the learning that comes from that instead of trying to punish or hide it because we're actually more afraid about our own titles or our job security. And so I just think that for me, when as you're talking about all these pieces, they need to work together, and they really does. This is for me where culture really can make or break what's happening. And so we need to spend more time and not put so much effort on L&D professionals and say, this is your job, like just take care of learning. It's really how can we all work together and co-create a culture that's going to help us all do our best and be our best, no matter where we're working. So I know we're wrapping up our conversation. Where do we go from here? What feels important, threads to keep chatting about or new actions to take forward?
I, as a educator, practitioner, designer, I would like to put safety at the heart of every piece of design work I do. And then that safety will reach a learner through design work. How about you?
Yeah, I know this conversation has me thinking a lot about just, I don't know, I really appreciate the conversation to think more about these micro moments of learning and innovation. And I mean, it reconfirms why I love what I do. Because as you said, keep designing for people, keep thinking about safety, but keep making sure that there's space for the whole learning journey, even outside of official work. But I guess that's also a good question to ask whoever is listening in, follow your curiosity. What are you taking away from this conversation with Anu and myself? And yeah, what will you do next to empower or support a learning and culture environment wherever you are? Well, thank you, Anu, so much. It was so lovely to meet you and chat with you today.
And you, I learned so much from your experiences and your approaches to design work. And it feels like you're a global designer. And I'm a big astrology girl. I'm a Sagittarius and I love globetrotting.
Oh,
So, yeah, I think the need for belonging and a wish to see how it works in classrooms all over the world will keep us connected.
yes, definitely.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing speaking to you.
Yes, you too. Have to come see you in Scotland. Thank you so much.
When we hear authentic stories and real world experience, we seem to get fabulous episodes, and this is no exception. Please do let us know your thoughts and opinions on this one. And if you like the episode, please do rate and review. It makes a massive difference to us if you click on that 5-star button on your podcast player. An enormous thank you to Romy and Anu for their time in recording this and for sharing their points of view with us. There are lots of links in the show notes for this episode, along with contact details for our guests. Please do check the website as we have some exciting new episodes we want to record, and get in touch if you're interested in being a guest on any of them. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, and next time it's The Juggling One. As always, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.